Now we want to look at problem number 17, and it's titled Walking Rates. So out of your book, chapter 2, section 2, 2.2, here is problem number 17. Two children who are 224 meters apart start walking toward each other at the same instant at rates of 1.5 meter per second and 2 meters per second. Part A says, when will they meet? And part B says, how far will each have walked? And actually in your book you see a picture there. So I'm going to go ahead and for myself draw a little diagram. So if this dot represents the first person, and this dot represents the second person, and they ended up walking toward each other. When they started, they were 224 meters apart, and this person starts walking, and the speed or the rate which they're walking is 1.5 meters per second. And the second person walks a little faster, 2 meters per second. Now the first question is, how long will it be before they meet? Now for any of these kinds of problems, I call them travel problems, where people are walking, people are running, cars are driving, planes are flying, boats are going. The very important equation you're always going to use is D equals RT. D stands for distance, the distance you travel, equals the rate. Also, rate is the same as speed, so the rate or the speed you travel, and then the amount of time you're traveling. So all these kinds of story problems that I call travel problems are always going to be using this equation, distance equals rate times time. Let's figure out, let's say that we'll let T equal the amount of time they walked. So T is going to be the amount of time they walked before they bumped into each other. And now if you think about this, let's think about what's actually going on. The first person is walking, and the second person is walking, and they're walking toward each other. When they bump into each other, they will have walked the same amount of time. All right? Because they started walking at the same time. So each of them will have walked the same amount of time. They will not have walked the same distance because the second person is walking faster. But they will have walked the same amount of time. So if I look at the first person and I say, how far did the first person walk? Well, they're walking at 1.5 meters per second, and they walked the amount of time T. So this is the first person's distance walked. How far did the first person walk? Well, they were walking at 1.5 meters per second, and they walked a time of T. This is like the rate times the time, which equals the distance. And now I'm going to add to that the distance that the second person walked. Well, the speed or the rate of the second person was 2 meters per second. How long did the second person walk? The second person also walked T until they bumped into the other person. So this right here is the second person's distance walked. Now if you think about it, the distance, if you take the distance the first person walked, and the distance the second person walked, and you add those together, that has to equal how far apart were they when they started. And they were 224 meters apart. So if you add these two distances together, it has to equal 224 meters. Once again, when they started, they were 224 meters apart. They began walking toward each other. When they finally met together, they will have traveled 224 meters. So now, if I just look at the math part of this, I have 1.5t plus 2t equals 224. And now I can solve for t. 3.5t equals 224. So t equals 224 divided by 3.5. And as it turns out, that equals 64 seconds. So they each walked 64 seconds before they met. So this is the answer to part A, but then part B says how far will each have walked. So part B, well, we know the one person was walking 1.5 meters per second. So the first person, if they were walking 1.5 meters per second, and they ended up walking 64 seconds, then you take 1.5 times 64, and you grab your calculator, and that equals 96 meters. And then the second person, they were walking at 2 meters per second, and they also walked 64 seconds. So 2 times 64 is 128 meters. And now we have answered both questions that they asked.